do something that our church does on Sunday mornings. If you guys would open to Luke 10, I see a lot of Bibles. Assuming some of you guys have iPads on there. I'm going to read a story everybody knows. Luke 10:25 is a story of a Good Samaritan. A couple of years ago, reading through the Gospels, began to have a great compassion for these lawyers and Pharisees, these Sadducees, because I realized that all of the smart aleck things that they were saying were my responses. And so I started reading through their perspective, growing up in church, being a child of the church. One of our older members of our congregation said to me a couple of months ago, as we were creating vision for reaching our community and what that would look like in Independence, Missouri, he with tears in his eyes, said, "I love church." And I saw the pain of what he was saying, that we can love the traditions and the customs that we have. And in Independence, Missouri, even most Christians, we have to confess most Christians, those that believe Jesus Christ, on a Sunday morning don't want to have anything to do with most of the things that we're doing. So kind of talking out of that context in a very honest way, I'm going to read this, and we're going to take observations. We do this with 150 to 200 people on Sunday mornings, so we can pull it off in this crowd. It says this. I'm reading out of the ESV, if you're wondering. "And behold, a lawyer stood up to put him," Jesus, "to the test, saying, 'Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?' He said to him, 'What is written in the law? How do you read it?' And he answered, 'You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself.' And he said to him, 'You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live.' But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, 'And who is my neighbor?' Jesus replied, 'A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to that place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. And when he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back.' Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers?" He said, "The one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said to him, "You go and do likewise." I'm a pastor at Birchwood Church, which was planted in the 50s. It's a church that's always succeeded up to the point of about 10 years ago. It was planted in a small church, or a small house across the street. It was planted, I believe, in 54, 56, up until the mid-90s, sometime around 99, 2000. Saw great success. Even to 2002, there were still some great numbers things that were going on. But whenever I came into the church as a member in 2006, one of my closest friends now that I have in the world spent about 30 minutes trying to convince me not to go to church there. About 2 years later, I did the same thing with Aaron Crossley. They're our neighbors. They live 8 doors down from us. And I spent about 30 minutes trying to tell him, don't go to church here. Why in the world would you do that? There's 3 words written up here, in case I realize I wrote them small. Communion, community, and mission. This is stolen from Hugh Halter. You may or may not be familiar with Hugh Halter. Very different context where he's at in ministry in Denver. A church plant, a young church, very different than our context. In 2002, our church averaged about 700 people. Today, we're running about 130 to 160 on a Sunday morning. So hear what we did for discipleship and do something else. Maybe the plan here. One of the things we recognize is, to define these words, is that we probably have done communion as well as we can do it. By this, I don't mean the ordinance of eating bread and wine. I mean the spiritual activity of what that symbolizes. When we pray, when we do Bible study, when we meet together, we are trying to do communion. And I would even kind of encourage you this morning to recognize you probably can't do that any better. As hard as you may be trying to look for answers in that area, whenever we realize we're doing that, is everything we've been trained to do as pastors is on that area of communion. And my journey into this role as pastor came through Christian education. Spent a couple of years in youth ministry, had no clue what I was doing, so I escaped to a Christian school for 4 years where I could give back the knowledge that I had been given for the previous 6 years. And in that time, began to be a member and serve in Birchwood Church, and would ask students in the classroom, what's the point of Christianity? And growing up in a Christian school, they could not tell me what the point was. They could give me a whole lot of knowledge. We probably can't do this any better. And so this morning, even until a year or two ago, whenever I think on the word discipleship, I'm thinking curriculum, I'm thinking what book can I buy, what can we study? And so often my mind in discipleship runs that direction. And what I believe has happened at Birchwood Church, the positive things that are happening are happening. Yes, we are including these kinds of things, these communion-type activities. But as well, we are beginning to focus on mission. In 2008, we took some money that was supposed to build a bigger building whenever we were bursting at the seams, finally realized that wasn't going to happen, and poured that money into a couple of different places. One, fixed up a little bit of an area for the kids to copy as close as what we could. First Baptist in Blue Springs was doing with their kids program, just to make an area that was nice for the kids. And then as well, poured money into a house across the street where the church was planted, opened up a clothes closet, a food pantry, and we created on Thursday nights a thing called the Neighborhood Network, kind of like a food co-op. We eat a meal together. We bring people into the church, and it's a system for empowering people. One of our members of our church is starting a shelter in Independence designed to help women. And the idea is it's not a 30-day program. They can stay as long as they would like to stay. It's called TLC, and Beaumont Baptist Church is giving up some of their building space. And the idea is to begin to reach people where they're at. The other piece of the puzzle is community. And I don't mean fellowship, I mean community. Because when we say fellowship, it means everybody's there's going to be a Christian. And community means our friends are around, and we're with people. One of the things that's changed in trying to do community and trying to reach people is I quit writing my sermons in my office, and I went into a coffee shop. And then I realized after a year of doing that, I had my computer up in front of me the whole time. And so even though it doesn't work very well, I write sermons inside of a journal now. And it's harder on Sunday morning, but it's a way of spending my time with this down here to create community. And we're trying to encourage not just individuals to do this at our church, but we're trying to encourage our small groups to move this direction. And so even though we may have 200 people that kind of associate with our church, it's, as hard as I do, how hard it is to describe what a member is in a church now. But what we do have is we do have groups that are very close, and they've been meeting in homes even for some of them 4 and 5 years. And what we've been pushing has been communion. Recreate in your home what we're doing on Sunday morning, and recreate in every event this Bible study and this prayer. And these. So what we're trying to do is then open up these communities and to see that it is just as valid to say that we, instead of meeting as a small group, we're all going to identify neighbors, and one of our small group meetings is going to be inviting people over to our house to eat, eating meals together with people who are in our neighborhoods. When it snowed the other day, I didn't take the day off, but I never went into church. Aaron saw we were kind of out walking up and down the street and helping push cars out of the snow and shoveling people's driveways and taking ibuprofen. But trying to connect with neighbors and recognize these are the valid things that Jesus has called us to do, and they are not at all the things that we were told to do and expected to do whenever we were reading these deep theology books. And so I guess I think the point for us is the permission-giving part of recognizing that the valid part of ministry is not just communion. The valid part of ministry is also spending time together, being in places that are not protected places in churches or in homes, but being out in coffee shops. We've tried to move our small group into a coffee shop a couple of times. Goes well sometimes it doesn't. And to be on mission, to tangibly bless people. And so if you want more, this is completely copied from Hugh Halter's book, but yet we are trying to do this kind of in a context of a church that's existed for a long time. And one group at a time, we're trying to begin to build communities that do this. A tangible kingdom. And what he says is that whenever you see all three of these happening in the center of that, the kingdom of God becomes tangible. There's also some barriers that words that we use, but we begin to see application. Some of the barriers between these things are things like consumerism and individualism. By all means, when you look at this, see a group of people, don't see an individual. An individual cannot do this by themselves. Slowly, yes. I'm not going to say that there's 200 people that are doing this, and this also is, it's not a curriculum. And so one aspect of this, we have way too many people that are serving on committees that we have to have because of our Constitution. And so one of the things that I started doing was creating chaos and told people to start quitting these committees. And started with the chair of our elder board and told him he's the chair of the elder board, he's a deacon, he's on the properties team, he was on the personnel team, and he was doing something else. And I told him, I said, you can stay a deacon and an elder, but you got to quit all the rest of those. And so now the chair of those other teams is kind of mad at me, and some of our other elders are beginning to quit things, which is great to get them to quit doing those things. One of them that actually quit a personnel team and quit. This is another guy. Has an employee who is an alcoholic and has another friend who lost a wife to cancer, and we'd been talking about meeting together, and reading the Bible together, but doing just in McDonald's, read a couple past verses and then discuss it. Well, he managed over the course of a couple of months to get these guys together, and they started reading in John, but the two of them have both lost their wives, one to divorce and one to cancer. And he said he sat back and watched what Scripture and community does when you meet together, but yet he did that because he was able to quit all of those other committees, and it freed him up and gave him time. So part of it's quit doing stuff. The reaction at our church is good, and that's there is some pushback, and pushback always comes from completely random places. It's just all on the person. What we are doing differently than what you'll hear in Hugh Halter's book. Hugh Halter, this can go 1,000 different places, and I don't want to talk for 2 hours. We're trying to give opportunity for people to take this slowly, and so we're trying to use this inside of small groups and trying to use small communities to begin to do this, so that where we have a Bible study group that's meeting in a home, those 3 or 4 families can begin to take this on, and the challenge is to do something in the community, one thing a month in the community, one thing on mission, and one thing with this more communion-based thing. And so don't do any one thing 2 weeks in a row. Keep doing all 3 of them. So yeah, so far the responses to this are good. It's something to do, which is nice. The things we're telling people to do are fun. People want to go out and hang out and have fun. And so drink coffee. So I guess that's where the response is good, and it's like somebody mentioned, turning the battleship, and it always feels that way, turning the battleship with an oar. But I think that's where this allows it more one person at a time, one family, one small group at a time. And so I'm not going to say that there's 200 people doing this. I've identified about 4 small groups, and I'm starting there. That's where we're beginning to see some of these things. And it's difficult, and there's good stories, and there's 1,000 bad stories. And I would say the key word is permission giving, to give people permission to do these things. We recently had a small group that has existed for 2 or 3 years. It's people who are married, and they're beginning to have kids. So that's kind of the age group, late 20s, early 30s. And they switched leaders, and a leader came in, and I didn't want to read I almost read the email here this morning, but he said, he led for about 5 weeks, and then he did the worst thing you can do. He sent a big, long email. He used the word "you" way too many times to his small group, and he quit. And inside of the email, he said, Birchwood seems to be taking a shift and changing directions. He said, my passion is for reading the Bible and doing Bible study, and I just don't feel as gifted towards creating these great community events or for creating some authentic mission without feeling like I'm insulting people because they have something that I need, and that's how. And listening to that and then reading the story of the Good Samaritan, trying to identify for our leaders that it's not trying to shift directions from Bible study and prayer. Not that those are bad things, but that's not the only thing. And so kind of encouraging people to live in their communities and to find where people are at. And so so for this particular individual, luckily they stepped down on their own in that email. And so now it's getting the rest of that group who's burned out on Bible study because they've had basically 7 or 8 weeks of boring Bible study, and they've all been Christians for 20 years. Telling them, okay, it's time to start doing community and have fun again and get everybody stirred up and energized, because you can do life together and find some place to serve and go out and do something, be somewhere. And after 2 or 3 months of that, you're going to be ready to get back to some reading the Bible and prayer and create some of that chaos. And that's hard to say. It's hard to say we're going to do less Bible study and more hang out, have fun, drink coffee, party. That's not what pastors normally say, but it creates an energy behind it that it keeps the group together. Because if we're a part of groups, we want to be a part of groups that we have fun and it creates community and we have things in common. So part of that is permission giving, teaching our leaders to do that, and trying to train them how to be in the community. There's all 4 generations, and it's pretty evenly spread. Our youth group has struggled. Most of our youth are at First Baptist of Blue Springs. So, the conversation has been, if our 8-year-old was 15 years old, our youth group has been kind of a weak point, and so parents, it's hard to leave kids in that situation, so that's going to be a whole other issue. But